Hello everybody and welcome to Women of the NHS Podcast with me, your host, Kate Kelly. This podcast is about celebrating and collaborating with women of the NHS from a variety of backgrounds and roles within the NHS. Within the podcast, we will be informally chatting about their experiences and stories, exploring these women's opinions on medical school, female representation, hopes for the future of a more inclusive NHS, medical conditions that disproportionately affect women, and the nitty-gritty in between. I am excited to be interviewing and working with women in different stages of their career and across different sectors of the NHS. I want this podcast to celebrate women of the NHS and shine a light on the female experience from different perspectives. Today, I am so excited to introduce Dr Shehla, who has specialised in general practice as a GP. Dr Shehla, please can you tell us more about your specialism and why you chose this particular specialism?
I chose general practice after a few years of making a decision about what I wanted to specialise in. I came into medicine as a graduate entry, so I had worked in research before doing medicine. I was a bit older in age and I had a very young child going through medical school. So inevitably, thinking about family life and personal and professional kind of motivation and aspirations has definitely helped shape me and move me into general practice. I think general practice has given me the opportunity to get to know my patients, work with them over a long period of time, get to know their families. I think it tests me intellectually in lots of different areas on a daily basis because there's so many different things and problems that walk through the door.
Please can you tell me about your experience with regards to medical school?
So medical school was great. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was, something that I had never really thought I'd be able to do. So just the opportunity of being in med school was fantastic. I started medical school, as I said, with a young child. So I found out I'd been accepted to medical school the same week I found out I was pregnant with my first child, and decided to bite the bullet and just go ahead with it. So my daughter was born on the 1st of September 2008, and I started medical school the 15th of September. So it was,
wow.
It was a huge challenge in the sense of I was trying to be a new mum, first time mum, and balancing that out with, what is traditionally a very demanding course.
Yeah.
But the graduate entry medical programme at University of Nottingham is based in Derby, and I'm originally from Derby, so I had fantastic family support, particularly my mum, my husband, my siblings, to allow me to try and balance that out. So medical school was interesting, navigating with a young child and really treating it as a job, and coming home and being a mum, but also trying to prep for exams. I managed to get through it full time and was very fortunate to have passed my exams without having to resit and go through various challenges in that sense. But it's not something I would recommend, and probably something I won't do again. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been an incredibly intense period of time.
It was. When I look back now, I think I was in my 20s, and I think you have a sense of I can do anything.
Yeah.
And as I've got older, I just think actually, having 1 year extra or taking time out wouldn't have been detrimental either to my medical career or being a mum. But I was very fortunate in the support that I had. There were definitely challenges in terms of maternal guilt, as there is with any working mum.
Yeah.
But my daughter's a couple of weeks away from being 15 now, and she's absolutely brilliant and amazing. And on reflection, I won't change what I did. I think life throws challenges at you, and you either work through it or you change your path. And I don't regret any of it at all, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This almost leads quite well on to the next question. But how is your work-life balance?
I think work-life balance as a GP at the moment is difficult depending on what you choose to do. So I'm a GP partner, which means that I own the GP business along with my fellow partners, and that has a huge amount of demand on us. I think general practice is a very difficult environment within the NHS to work in because of pressures across the NHS, and general practice is just at the forefront of some of that. I do enjoy a lot of what I do, so I have lots of opportunities to do lots of different roles, and I work 3 days clinically, but during the rest of the week I do non-clinical work, so I do things in leadership and management, and interest in equality, diversity and inclusion, so work around that. So that also really fulfills me, and is challenging as well, but I definitely feel that my work-life balance is more towards the work currently. But it's certainly something that I'm reflecting on currently, just to try and get the balance a bit more towards life. Yeah, for sure.
It is a struggle, isn't it, sometimes?
It is, yeah. I mean, sometimes in medicine you just get so many opportunities thrown at you, and you just feel like, oh, shall I do it? And then you're like, oh yeah, this sounds amazing, I'll go ahead and do it. And before you know it, you've got 10 different things that you're trying to balance, and you get yourself into that kind of circle of burnout, and I hopefully I'm not there yet, but I absolutely see how it happens, for sure.
Yeah. How has the NHS changed since your time within it?
I think it's changed hugely, even in the 10 years since I've been qualified. So I graduated in 2012, and we're 11 years down the line, and I've seen the challenges of the NHS, and what I see is, defunding and the impact that has on colleagues, but also on patients. I think being a patient in the NHS now is very different to what it was 10 years ago. We have less staff. The staff that we do have are stretched. They're not valued. And I feel that these are policy decisions that are made, and I'm quite firm in my political view about, what's happening and why it's happening. And I genuinely do feel that the patients that we see are not getting the quality of care that we aspired to and have previously been able to achieve. And that's really morally difficult for us to work within, in that environment where external changes and pressures and political movement impacts on the care that we give to our patients on a daily basis. And the NHS is seen as a bit of a pawn in the political game, and absolutely I see a shift towards privatisation, and I genuinely fear for the care of patients moving forward, and that the NHS will never be what it was at its peak and at its best, which is a huge shame. And it actually instills a lot of sadness, actually, in a lot of us who have been working within the NHS over at least the last decade, to see the changes that have happened.
It's quite scary, isn't it, when you see like these small parts being sort of siphoned off? And
it's happening, and it's something that a lot of us have been worried and concerned about, and some of my colleagues have been very vocal about the privatisation by stealth, and are certainly more articulate in their arguments about how it's happened and why it's happened. But as a frontline GP, I've absolutely seen the impact of that. Patients are waiting longer to be seen by secondary care colleagues, and that's because of wider pressures. And then that inevitably feeds back on GPs because patients can't be seen anywhere else, and that increases the demand and the frustration and so on. So it seems like a vicious circle, and I know I do, and some of my colleagues just despair at the privatisation that's occurring, and what will happen. Even though we've been shouting about it and talking about it and trying to raise awareness, it's still going ahead, and we'll see where the NHS is in a few years.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when I don't know about you, because I'm also an art teacher.
Okay.
And sometimes with the recent strikes, it does feel a bit like the rhetoric's a bit like these lazy teachers.
Yes,
and I feel like sometimes it's very similar with NHS staff.
It is, absolutely. And there is a lot of that rhetoric around, actually, public sector workers are not valued in the way that they should be. And, we are members of society that are trying to work for the betterment of society, and we do have a vocational aspect to a lot of what we do, but there has to be a time when there has to be value to what we do in terms of us being able to live our lives in the way that we want to. Nobody comes into a public sector job to become a millionaire or a billionaire, and to not be able to afford bills because of the cost of living, and not be able to provide a living for our families, it is incredibly difficult. And I recognise that doctors are privileged in many ways, but there is no value attached, or very little value attached, to what we do and what we give. And the government seems adamant at the moment to not engage with the junior doctor strikes, to give them the value that they deserve, particularly having worked through COVID. And that's why there's an exodus going on at the moment. And we will get to a point where we used to be the destination to go to for worldwide doctors, and we no longer will be that, and that will only worsen staffing, recruitment and retention crisis that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hugely difficult.
Have you been affected by the strike action, and kind of what are your thoughts on it?
I 100% support my junior doctor colleagues. I went through junior doctors kind of training. I was part of the strike several years ago, because at that time we recognised the direction that we were going in. I'm not a junior doctor anymore, obviously, as a GP, but I certainly support all of my colleagues who are taking part in strike actions. And I think that unless our colleagues take the stand that they are doing, that the working conditions will only worsen. And under the guise of austerity many years ago, junior doctors did not have any pay increases to keep in line with inflation. And that kind of continued to the point where now, there are some jobs, and this is, that pay more than junior doctors do get paid. And these are the people who are trying to save our lives and keep us healthy and be productive members of society. And we've got to the situation now, I think, that unless they take a stand, it's just going to get worse, and I fully support them. It does have an impact on our practice. We've got junior doctors who train at our practice, so inevitably when they're striking we have less capacity, but that goes across the system, across the whole of the NHS, so we adapt and move with it.
I know for unfortunately my union wasn't striking, but my partner's was, and I know that they found it incredibly challenging as on like an ethical level. I feel wrong to be striking. I imagine that's exactly how.
Yeah,
but probably 10 times more stressful, because
it is. I mean, as a junior doctor, you go into work thinking you're going to help people, and you're going to make a positive difference to people's lives, and then to withhold that is difficult. But if you get to the point where you have no other options, then I hope that the public understand that, and they really appreciate the background as to why the junior doctors are doing what they're doing, because ultimately it will be for the for the benefit of society and for patients who need the NHS. So I hope that the government will negotiate fully and properly with the union, and I don't think what the junior doctors are asking is unreasonable. You go anywhere else in the world and doctors are valued way more than they are in the NHS, and I think that needs to happen now. Yeah. And it's the same with teachers, and I agree with all public sector workers. It's frustrating as a parent when teachers have been striking, the kids have been at home, but I absolutely support the principle of valuing our public sector workers, including teachers and doctors, and rail workers, and every other sector that's striking. And it's a reflection of what the government has been doing for many, many years. And people have finally just said enough is enough.
Yeah.
And you get to that point eventually, don't you? So, and we're at it now. So,
because you're hearing about doctors as well going to food banks.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Really ridiculous. Yeah. And why do we have to live in a society where that is happening? And why is there, so many food banks all over the country that we wouldn't even have heard of 15, 20 years ago? And, if people can't even get basics like food, how are you expecting society to move forward and be progressive and actually inclusive? You just can't. People aren't able to function. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Have you or a colleague ever experienced sexism, homophobia or racism within the workplace?
Yes. So I obviously have an intersectional identity, so I'm female, I'm Asian, Pakistani background, and I'm obviously Muslim because of the way you can see I wear a headscarf hijab. And that has absolutely been a factor in how patients interact with me. I have had patients refuse to see me. I've had patients call me racial slurs like Paki, which is something that I grew up with as a child in the 80s and 90s. And it's incredibly difficult. And being an overtly Muslim woman has had its own challenges. People have accepted Islamophobia as something that just happens because of certain media and political rhetoric that has been not only kind of based in the UK but also worldwide. And the actions of a minority have had a huge detrimental impact on the majority of us who are peace-loving Muslims and want to be part of society and integrate and work in all kinds of sectors that we do. Being judged on my faith has had implications in terms of how I interact with patients, because there's always that fear of actually, are you going to judge me before I've even had a chance to speak to you and show you that actually I am a doctor that works well, and I think I don't think I'm a bad doctor at all. But one instance that I have talked about on a number of occasions and publicly is about an occasion when a patient refused to see me when I went to see him about a specific issue, and he interrupted what I was saying and said, I refuse to talk to you because your religion is about killing people and my religion is about saving lives. And that was probably one of the most difficult experiences that I've had as a Muslim healthcare professional, because it was in the middle of a night shift. I was there at, past 11, 12 o'clock at night trying to speak to a patient about a matter. And then to be confronted with that attitude tells you how pervasive Islamophobia is, not only within the NHS but also within society, and how those views permeate interactions that should have no kind of there shouldn't be any kind of level of judgment based on religion. I treat all patients of all faiths, all backgrounds, all ethnicities. I certainly don't make a judgment about their lives and their lifestyles and their beliefs. But Islamophobia has absolutely been taken as being an acceptable part of being a Muslim in the UK, and I feel strongly that it shouldn't be. I've got plenty of Muslim colleagues who do phenomenal amounts of work in lots of different places, and that's why I advocate a lot for Muslim women and try and speak up about my experiences, because it's something that we shouldn't accept. It is distressing when those incidents happen. It definitely takes a dent on you personally and professionally as well, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever experienced sexism in the workplace, but sometimes I don't know if you feel the same, but it feels like you're being grated away at. Yeah. And it's like, it just feels like it's one after the other, and it's just exhausting sometimes. It is.
And that's where the kind of weathering concept comes from, is that people from an ethnic background or a marginalised protected characteristic have this kind of daily grind of, either microaggressions or overt racism or overt Islamophobia or overt sexism. And that does impact on people's ability to live healthy, long lives. And there is data showing that. And, you put being a woman with being an Asian and then being a Muslim, and that intersectionality just compounds and transforms any type of discriminatory behaviour that you face, because of the kind of multitudes of the different lenses that are being affected by that.
I really appreciate your honesty.
No, it's fine. And that's what drives my kind of work in EDI, and that's why I chose to do I have an interest in equality, diversity and inclusion, just because of my own lived experiences in having the multiple marginalised identities and recognising how that impacts on our colleagues in the workplace, but also our patients. So it's something that hopefully has allowed me to channel those experiences into being something positive and allow me to do the roles that I do.
Do you feel like there is sufficient healthcare for medical professionals?
I think there's increasing awareness of mental health issues affecting medical professionals. So, we have the Practitioners Health Service available, particularly during the pandemic when there was a huge mental health burden on healthcare professionals facing really difficult clinical scenarios. There was increasing recognition and awareness of support being needed for healthcare professionals. I don't think we're there yet fully in terms of people being more open about their mental health. I think we have definitely made progress, but certainly I think there's more work to be done to recognise the impact of being a healthcare professional in the NHS as it is at the moment. I think if the NHS was a great place to work, that will inevitably improve well-being. But the environment that we work within is so challenging that unless we change the environment, we can't keep putting well-being strategies in place to say, let's give you a bit of mindfulness to cope with the environment that you're in. How about we change the environment and stop having to put these interventions in? It just seems like we're working the wrong way around.
What would you do if you had the power to change elements of the NHS?
What would I do? Oh, goodness. To change element, I would absolutely keep the NHS as a public service. I would. I know there's an argument that how much more money can we pump into the NHS, but I think we also need to recognise that we have people living longer because of how well the NHS has been working, and we can manage lots more medical problems. But one thing that I would hope that as a frontline GP is to recognise and value GPs. I think we do a huge amount of work, and there has been a concerted media narrative and rhetoric around so-called lazy GPs who are not doing enough to pull their weight. And then there are political reasons behind that, which I'm sure the listeners don't want to know about. But I think unless we value public health and the benefit that GPs can give in preventing illness and disease and progression, then we're going to be in a situation where we're going to lose a hugely valuable part of the NHS, and that's already happening with GPs leaving almost on a daily basis. So the one thing that I would absolutely change is funding the NHS better, so that GPs at least can do their job in a way that we feel fulfilled and our patients are happy with what we're doing for them.
Yeah. How do you feel women are represented within the NHS or the medical profession?
Thinking back, I think women are better represented now than they probably have been in the past. I'm thinking particularly the BMA kind of GP committee chair for the first time in over 100 years was Dr Farah Jamil. She's again from an intersectional background, so Asian, international medical graduate, and female, and was able to take a senior position. But her experience has been enlightening in ways that actually, she went on maternity leave and she's had a vote of no confidence against her and has been removed from that post. So in some ways you think, wow, we've made so much progress, but then you look at other things and you think, actually, have we made as much progress as we think we have? And, she was suspended just before she went on maternity leave for apparent, issues within the workplace, which I'm not privy to, so I can't comment on. But my kind of reflection is that when a woman is in a position of power and leadership, she is criticised in ways that a man doing the same behaviours or doing the same thing would be seen as being an assertive leader. A woman doing that is deemed to be bullying. And I think, yes, progress has been made. Do I think enough is being done? No. I think there have been some amazing female leaders. So Nikki Kanani being one of them, and that was when I was very much newly qualified GP, and she's been great in psychiatry. There's Dr Lade Smith, Ananta Dave, is Chief Medical Officer for Black Country system. So you see women, Ambola, leading on the health inequalities agenda. So there are absolutely women from different backgrounds. And obviously there's a shout out to Katie Bramall-Stainer, who's the newly elected BMA GPC chair, again female in a position of power and leadership. So there are some phenomenal women out there. I think there's scope to do more, but I also think that sexism is still something that they face, and even people like me as a GP in a practice, there are elements of sexism in the work that I face, because although I'm a leader within my practice, there are elements that people may think that I don't do things in a certain way, whereas if a male colleague was doing it, then that's deemed acceptable. But if I do exactly the same thing, then people feel the need to check that, are you okay?
Right.
And it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot more that we can be doing, but it's heartening to see that those opportunities are now opening up, and you're seeing prominent healthcare professionals in leadership positions, and that could be really empowering for people like me who are on the front line, seeing actually there's leaders who have managed to navigate the system to get to places where they can influence change.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the final question. When you're thinking about the history of medicine and the NHS, or maybe in your life, just your personal life, is there a particular influential woman you would consider a hero or an idol?
This is going to sound incredibly cliched, but my mum.
Everyone said that so far.
Really?
So interesting, yeah.
I think whenever I think of a woman that I would aspire to be, or has been steadfast in their support of me, it has to be my mum. And I know a lot of people say that, and I'm very fortunate to have a mum that has sacrificed a lot. So my mum grew up in Pakistan and was not educated, got married at a very young age, had children, and to give me the opportunities and make so many sacrifices, which I won't be able to talk about without crying about it, to allow me to do what I've been able to do is something that you can never repay back.
Unfortunately, the recording equipment cut at the end there, but I would just like to thank again Dr Shehla for her time and conversation and being on the Woman of the NHS podcast. I'd also like to thank Jemima Grosset for her fabulous intro music and exit music. Thank you for listening. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Woman of the NHS podcast. I would like to thank again Dr Shehla for her time and conversation and being on the Woman of the NHS podcast. I would also like to thank Jemima Grosset for her beautiful music production and turning my vision into sound. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.